view-wise like that? Well, because it's arbitrary. People have assigned it to be the case. That's why there's no actual mystical, magical power that these rocks have, because there's nothing in the universe that makes it so. There's no law of the universe that says that this rock has to do this function, right? That's the point of attack when you go into these conversations, to have somebody think about their beliefs, right? Because there's nothing wrong with people analyzing their beliefs. But if you just go in saying, you're a theist, you believe in God, and you're irrational, that you're shut down the conversation at that point.
So how do we engage? What is the first place to start with, let's say, you or I? And I still don't have a solid fix on where you're at theistically, atheistically, or however you would like to label it.
I'm an enigma on that.
Yeah. So I'm going to ask you directly here in a second. But let's say we're trying to figure something out. We're in the church, and somebody comes in, and because they were invited by a friend, and they say, I'm here because my friend invited me. I don't really believe in this. How does the conversation go from there with the theist demonstrating the veracity of their beliefs? Does it always have to end in a question mark?
To some degree, yes, because my particular position is I'm an agnostic. And this is something that most people in our community now understand the difference. Matter of fact, even the ACA from Texas, Matt Dillahunty, Aaron Raw, everybody that we've engaged with, and I think the absolute world of, Aaron is a great guy. I mean, we may not agree on everything, but these people are amazing at what they do. They're just awesome people. And I think they even realize now there's different ways you can approach things and you can define things. And even they recognize that the position they're calling atheism is Gnosticism in philosophy. Okay, it's just called something different. They call it weak atheism or what's called implicit atheism. But that's fine. That's what they want to take the label. There's nothing wrong with that. I had about a 20-minute to a half-hour conversation with genetically modified skeptic the other night, and he gave me very good justificatory reasons why he took the label atheist. I mean, he made sense, and I couldn't fault him for it. I have very good reasons why I take the label agnostic, and it is not atheism. It is not theism. It is a completely different thing. It's neither. And so when people say, well, you must be one or the other, they're already starting off on the wrong foot. That's not an actual dichotomy. That's just something that they definitionally make colloquially as a dichotomy. Even in philosophy, it's not that way. But when you're talking about somebody who goes in the church, right, the theist is going to be trying to convince a person, hey, this is what you should believe, right? Almost like it's an obligation. This is what you're obligated to believe as a human, that God exists, and you need to follow his plan. And here's the Bible and how you go about doing that, right? But when you ask somebody, well, what makes this obligatory? What is it that's in the scriptures that necessarily get me to God? When I deconverted, I had to think to myself, what was it that I was attaching to a label of God? Because I couldn't make that jump. My experiences, and I'm fine with people having subjective experiences. We all go through subjective experiences. Everybody that's ever deconverted, most of them probably has some kind of experience they can say was a religious experience of some kind. Okay. Some of them can now fully explain it. Some can't, right? And I'm one of those people may not fully be able to explain it. But the experience doesn't get me to a deity. It just gets me to, I had some experience that I can't explain. And I think that if God existed, he would make that connection, right? And it can't be just on faith alone. When he gives us reason and he gives us the ability to think critically and he gives us the ability to do inductive arguments and deductive reasoning, without that linchpin of how to get from the feeling or the sensory thing that God gave you to him actually existing, it's like the is-ought gap in Hume's is-ought fallacy, right? The fact that you can't draw an is from an ought from an is for a categorical norm. And there's always a hidden premise in there. And I think that this is kind of similar. I couldn't justify any longer putting that to a deity. And then, of course, as you may know, I was Mormon. And I have the utmost respect for the Mormon church. As far as the people, I love the people, great people. I mean, I grew up with them. I will never disparage the Mormon people. And I think it's really rude when people don't know anything about the Mormon church and don't understand how kind these people they are. And they do really believe. But in 2008, they started involving themselves into political arenas where they were trying to fund Proposition 8 and try to remove the ability for homosexuals to get married. I thought that was something that a church should not do. I thought that church should not get involved in the church and state. And then I found out they were also involved in things called the Evergreen Project, which was a reparative therapy to, quote unquote, pray the gay away, which included things like electroshock therapy, right? This mortified me.
Yeah.
And that's not because I'm gay. I am completely heterosexual. People realize this, but I am one of those heterosexual males that believe you have a right to be any sexual orientation you want, anything that you were, I don't believe you choose so much your sexual orientation, because I did not choose mine. Yeah. And so when I found this about the church, it made me start down a path going, well, what else about it that I don't no longer support? And that's kind of how I led myself out of being Mormon. And I think that most people go through similar type deconversions from listening to your channel and your stories. They all seem to be very similar in some ways.
Yeah. So what's the similarity? Is it the intellectual drive out?
It's the can I actually justify this any longer?
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So I love that approach, because what I usually say when I tell somebody that I deconverted is the fact that I didn't find the core claims of Christianity evidently true. So in saying that, it's the same thing as saying the justifications fall away. The is ought. I've heard this conversation before. I don't know anything about it. Steve, can you help me out? What is that conversation? Because it sounds interesting and I've heard it a few times. What's the is ought?
In a nutshell, it's called Hume's guillotine. And what he posited was this. He said, I could have something that I know that is, which is a fact. But how do I get a value statement out of it? How do I get an ought? And you can do it what's called a hypothetical norm, which is, for example, if I say, if I want to run a race, I ought to run fast, right? It just flows. That's an objective fact, right? If I want to win, I ought to run fast. Now, I can cheat or I could want to lose, but if that's a hypothetical norm that is called, that you can derive an is from not. But the categorical norm is always. Why? If I say gold is a metal, that's a fact. But why do we value it? Why ought gold be valuable?
Yeah.
Well, there's no real reason why gold is valuable, except that it's our subjective thing that we give it value. There's nothing what's in the universe that says gold has to be valuable, and we decided that it'd be a metal, but Hume is basically saying that there's always a hidden premise between that is and that ought, so you can't derive a value from a fact.
So, okay, so then what is that argument used for then? Because I think I follow you so far. So what? Things exist.
It goes into objective morality a lot.
Yeah, okay.
Why ought we be moral, right? Yeah. And I think one of the things that drives me crazy is that when people start talking about moral conversations and they've never read a book on the topic, they've never read a paper on the topic, they never in any way try to understand what these words mean in philosophy, like objective, subjective, absolute, relative. And even I have a very difficult time, because in the literature they are used different ways. And you hear people throw out there, the only type of objective morality is God. Well, no, there can be objective morality without God. People saying that there can't be an objective morality, well, they're flawed from the get-go, because in order to say that, they have to do what's called a reductio, or some kind of proof to show that's the case. But like Sam Harris makes a great argument for objective morality. Dr. Richard Carrier makes a great argument. But to me, it doesn't matter whether morals are objective or subjective, right? Why ought we do something isn't so much a meta-ethical position, right? It doesn't matter whether a moral fact is because we believe it to be a moral fact, or because there's some actual reason of reality, which is a objective or subjective. What I want to know is, what will you do in a given situation? What are your normative ethics, right? If I say this is your scenario, do you do the ethical thing? And what normative ethical theory do you apply to it? Virtue ethics, deontological, there's consequentialism, utilitarianism. There's a whole bunch of ways you can show somebody this is what you should do ethically. And that's what I'm concerned about. And I don't hear a lot of those conversations. I always hear people talking about, well, morals are subjective. No, they're objective. No, they're subjective. Who cares? I want to know, what the hell are you going to do in a moral situation? Are you going to steal that candy bar because you know you can, even if nobody's watching? Right? That's what I have an interest in.
So that sounds like a great kind of situational piece to work out, especially if you work for some sort of corporation or organization that has to drive home the ethics training semi-annually or annually. Things
Been
we
there,
ought
done
not
that,
to do.
Yes.
Yeah. When I was in law enforcement, we had to go through that training, I think at least once a year, and then other types of training that closely related to it, either quarterly or biannually. Now, so I get that part. And then, Steve, sometimes, when you make an arrest for somebody that had possession of drugs or whatever, you're in the interrogation and you're kind of thinking, okay, I get the ethics here. The ethics says, I don't want to be high on cocaine while I'm working on an airplane because that puts people's safety at risk. Okay, that's the ethics. But should cocaine be illegal always? Does this kind of breach into the is-ought philosophy or discussion? Because that's what I was thinking. Like, why does it have to be illegal always?
I don't think it should. I'm actually for advocation. I'm for legalizing drugs for the most part. It's just, we're at the point the drug war was failed from the get-go. It was failed from the inception. But the is-ought is more relating a fact of nature. I mean, cocaine is a drug. That's a fact. Okay. Why ought we legalize it is another question, right? Why should be always the categorical norm that we ought to always legalize pot or marijuana or cocaine. There's no way to actually derive that ought from that is. There's no way to say because of this is why we ought to do this, as there is on a hypothetical such as, if I want to survive, I ought to eat. Yeah. Okay, that's a fair hypothetical norm, right? But what one can ask, well, why do I want to survive? Well, I mean, I have practical reasons. I have pragmatism. I have prudentialism. I have other reasons why I want to survive. But it's very difficult to get that ought from that is. And so when you talk about objective morality, is why ought we do something objectively true all the time? Why is murder objectively wrong? Why ought we not to murder? Murder is bad, but bad is a subjective thing, right? Good is very difficult to even define.
Yeah, let me pause you right there, Steve. That's it, man. That's okay. So murder is bad. Like, this is the thing we would all say, right? And yet, murder is a word which we use to reference an event or activity. Okay, and that event or activity is the cessation of one's life, usually by means of somebody else acting possessively in some maybe abstract way, right? Hey, I don't want you to have your life anymore, or I want your resources, no matter how our point of reference is when we're the ones committing the murder. The fact is, I don't want to explain that too much, but now a murder has occurred. So how do we go from murder occurred to murder is bad? And let me premise your response by saying, but don't we see that naturally? Don't we see murder naturally throughout the whole universe and in basically all organisms? Go for it.
Yeah, but I would take the Sam Harris approach. What Sam Harris does, he tries to – there's something called the grounding problem. And the grounding problem is basically what makes something objectively true, morally speaking. There's a different type of fact out there than a normal fact, right? We already established gold is a metal. That's a fact, right? It's a fact that the earth is not flat. That's a fact. These are objective things, and anybody, doesn't matter what you believe, can go verify. Flat earthers, you're wrong. So those are objective facts. But moral facts are a little bit different, really. How do we analyze a moral fact? How do we know what a moral fact is? Is it something we can objectively look at? And what his approach is more like the lines of harms and benefits. It's called eudaimonia, which is the flourishing of human nature, humans of itself. We do not want to cause undue harm to other people, right? So as a society, we ought not to murder because it's grounded in harms and benefits. It's harmful to society, and it doesn't benefit the society. It doesn't benefit us as a human race. That's one way to ground it. Wittgenstein, I think, grounds it in empathy or compassion, right? Because we are compassionate creatures, and morality exists only for the fact that we are actual moral agents. If we didn't exist, would there be morality?
Right. So let's say
Think
no,
about
because
that.
We have the word morality. That's going to be my off-the-cuff response. We have the word morality, and this references behaviors and agreed-upon rules. All right, so that's my response.
But we also have propositions, though, that are either true and false. If I say it's always wrong to kill, I may not be referring to humans. There could be an alien race out there that has the ability to kill. That morality would affect them if they are moral agents. But not everything's a moral agent, right? I mean, animals, we don't really consider them moral agents. They kill in the wild all the time because that's how they survive. It's not an immoral act for them to kill. It